Hello everyone. Today I have a meaningful story to share with you. This is not only a listening practice for improving your English, but also a powerful lesson about life. The story is called Nothing is Free, and it will remind you that success always comes with effort, patience, and determination. On certain nights, when the town went quiet and the mountain wind pressed against the windows, Ethan Carter would sit on the back steps of his small house and stare at the sky. He wasn't looking at the stars. He was measuring the distance between where he stood and where he wanted to be. Ethan was 20 years old, living in a narrow valley town where everyone knew everyone, and opportunity felt like something that happened somewhere else. His father, Daniel, worked long hours as an auto mechanic. Most evenings he came home with grease under his nails and silence in his shoulders. His mother, Rosa, cleaned houses across town and counted tips at the kitchen table after dinner, smoothing out wrinkled bills as if she could stretch them into something larger. His younger sister, Lily, only 10, believed her brother could do anything. She watched him the way children watch superheroes. Without doubt, that was the problem. Ethan had big dreams, bigger than the town and bigger than their circumstances. He didn't just want a stable job. He wanted to build something, a chain of restaurants, a name people recognized, a life where his parents could rest instead of endure. But every time he looked at their small kitchen, at the patched cabinets and the single flickering light, guilt crept in. Who was he to dream that big when the rent was barely covered? One night after dinner, he finally spoke. He said quietly that he didn't want them to struggle forever. Daniel wiped his hands and met his son's eyes. He told him that dreams aren't free, that if he wanted something better, he would have to pay for it. Not with money at first, but with effort, time, and sacrifice. Start with what you have, even if it's small. Those words stayed with Ethan long after the lights were off. The next afternoon, walking through town, he noticed something simple. People loved fresh bread, but the nearest bakery was miles away beyond the highway. Not everyone had time or gas to drive there. An idea formed quietly. What if he brought the bread here? It wasn't glamorous and it wasn't a restaurant empire, but it was a start. The only problem was that he had no money to buy inventory. For 2 nights he argued with himself, afraid of failing, afraid of embarrassment, afraid of proving he wasn't capable of anything bigger. On the 3rd morning, before he could change his mind, he put on his jacket and walked toward the highway. The bakery belonged to Mr. Whitaker, a disciplined man who was not easily impressed. Ethan rehearsed his words with every step. He didn't have money or experience. All he had was determination. And sometimes that has to be enough to begin. He pushed open the bakery door, knowing this was the first payment toward his dream. Courage. The smell of flour and heat filled the room. Mr. Whitaker stood behind the counter, focused on cooling loaves. He said they were closed for wholesale orders. Ethan swallowed and explained that he wanted to sell the bread in his town but couldn't pay up front. He asked for 1 week, promising to return the money in full and keep only a small margin. If he failed, he wouldn't come back. Silence tested his confidence. When asked why he should be trusted, Ethan answered that he would work harder than anyone given a chance. After a long pause, Mr. Whitaker agreed to 1 week with no excuses. The next morning, Ethan carried heavy crates back to Millbrook. He set up a simple folding table in the park and called out that he had fresh bread. Most people walked past at first, and doubt crept in quickly. Then he sliced a loaf and offered free samples. The first bite changed everything. Customers multiplied, and by late afternoon every loaf was gone. That evening he returned and paid in full. From then on, he woke at 4 each morning, walked miles, carried crates, and stood for hours. After 2 months, he bought a small rolling cart to carry more bread. One afternoon, a customer suggested that if he baked his own bread, he could keep more profit. The idea frightened him, but he knew growth required risk. He asked Mr. Whitaker to teach him. At first, the old baker resisted, but finally told him to arrive at 3 in the morning and not be late. The lessons were hard. The world at 3 a.m. felt silent and honest. Ethan learned to measure precisely and knead patiently. His first batches were disasters. Too dense or too dry. His hands blistered and his shoulders burned. One morning, staring at another failed loaf, he wondered if he wasn't built for this. But he remembered that dreams aren't free and that failure was proof he was learning. He returned with sharper focus. And 2 weeks later, Mr. Whitaker quietly admitted that one loaf was right. Ethan rented a small oven at home, and soon his family joined the effort. Rosa measured ingredients, Lily sealed bags, and Daniel built shelves. Customers noticed the homemade taste, and sales grew as Ethan added cookies and pastries. Then a new competitor named Eric opened a bright, modern bakery in town. Crowds gathered there, and Ethan's sales dropped sharply. Fear hit him, but instead of complaining, he studied the competition. He realized people were buying experience, not just bread. He repainted his cart, added a logo, offered tea samples, and learned cake decoration from library videos. He remembered customers' names and listened to their stories. Slowly they returned, not because he was bigger, but because his effort was visible. He learned that competition doesn't destroy you. Complacency does. Just as stability returned, a storm brought disaster. One night he smelled smoke and found flames near the oven. He fought the fire and saved the building, but equipment was badly damaged. The next morning, people whispered that maybe it was too much for him. His savings were not enough to repair everything. Fear shouted that this might be the end. Sitting alone in the damaged bakery, he allowed himself to feel the exhaustion and frustration. Then he remembered that he had once started with nothing, and nothing hadn't stopped him. He asked Mr. Whitaker for advice and was told to work, adapt, and refuse to fall. Ethan moved equipment into his kitchen and continued baking from home. Without complaining, he kept serving customers. Soon the community responded. Farmers donated flour, neighbors offered tools, and volunteers helped clean. The fire had taken equipment, but it revealed loyalty. Months later, the shop reopened as Carter's Fresh Bakehouse with fresh paint and stronger wiring. On opening day, customers filled the space. Ethan looked around and saw proof that effort compounds and hardship sharpens you. He said simply that nothing in life is free. Not success, respect, or confidence. You earn it by continuing when it would be easier to stop. Over time, people came not just for bread, but for the story. Yet the story was never about bread. It was about paying the price when no one is watching, choosing growth over comfort, and understanding that failure is tuition, not defeat. Ethan once stared at the sky wondering how far his dreams were. Now he knew that the distance between where you are and where you want to be is measured in effort. And effort, given long enough, rises just like bread. Ethan's journey was never really about bread but about the invisible price behind visible success. People saw the crowded shop, but not the early mornings, blistered hands, or silent doubts. Success came in quiet decisions, returning after failure, studying instead of complaining, rebuilding instead of blaming. Trust was earned, skill was learned, loyalty was built. The fire showed that what he had built was character, and character cannot be burned down. In a world that wants fast results, His story reminds us that growth is often invisible before it becomes visible. The effort you make today shapes who you become tomorrow. Dreams demand payment. And the question is whether we are willing to pay it consistently. The deeper lesson is simple. Consistency under pressure builds unshakable confidence. Start small instead of waiting for perfect conditions. Treat failure as feedback, not identity. Improve when competition appears. Continue even when progress feels invisible. Now think about your own life. What is one goal you have right now that will require patience and hard work? Please share your answer in the comments so everyone can learn from different perspectives. And if this story inspired you, consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful stories like this.